Okay, so today we're going to take our path for birds and reptiles and focusing mainly on reptiles. So, characteristics of reptiles. Here's what we do know about reptiles. They are the first vertebrates to completely live on land. And we can see this phylogenetic tree here where we have them starting to develop in the Mesozoic era. Our largest reptiles are dinosaurs, which we know are now extinct and found within the fossil record. So why were they able to dominate the land for millions of years? Because of a few things. One, they have amniotic eggs, which are watertight. So they could actually lay eggs, and those eggs didn't have to be found in the water. They were able to breathe using lungs, and they also had a skin that was water repellent. Those are some factors or characteristics that are really important. Here's some characteristics of our modern reptiles. They live in a diverse habitats from deserts to tropical forests to aquatic ecosystems. They do not live in cold areas because their body just can't handle that. They're cold-blooded, so they have to have the sun to warm them. They have scales, not fur. They have dry skin, not slimy skin. They usually lay eggs, but sometimes they do have live birth and offsprings. They have ear holes instead of ears, and they have 4 legs while some, like snakes, have none. They're called ectothermic, which means cold-blooded. They lack feathers and they lack hair, and fertilization does occur internally. So let's look at some of the endoskeletons for these guys. So unlike our insects, they do have endoskeletons, not exoskeletons. So they have strong bones, and they're able to move very quickly. Their bones are jointed, they are bilateral in symmetry, and they have extremely cool toes and claws that allow them to move very quickly, to dig, and to attack. Look at these things, extremely long claws. They're able to respond using sensory organs, so vision is very important to detect predators and prey for them. They're able to hear and feel vibrations. And one thing that's really cool about snakes is they have what we call a Jacobson organ, which allows for them to sense chemicals. So their tongue actually spews out, and then it collects information and sends it back to the Jacobson organ, which then sends it to the brain. They can literally taste their prey, if you think of it that way. And let's talk about movement and response a little bit more. So I said they're ectothermic, which means they cannot control their body heat using their own metabolism. So right here is a picture of what we have. The layout in the sun, radiant energy from the sun is absorbed by the reptiles. Some is obviously reflected off. They have evaporation of saliva through here. They're able to conduct, so they like to lay on black surfaces like roads, rocks, because they'll conduct the heat this way, and then convection is the other way. So as warm air blows by them, they're able to absorb that air. So you'll see these guys laying out in warm days, trying to absorb that midday sun. The body temp is determined by their environment in which they live. They were able to hibernate when it's too cold. So here are 2 pictures of hibernation. One, snakes will coil into a pit and make a knot of snakes. And that's how they keep each other warm through the winter. So they'll actually slither into this burrow, which is laid below ground. And then they just kind of have a big old snake ball in there. Gross, but effective to maintaining heat. This is a dun dun dun. Yeah, you guessed it. It's a turtle. And specifically, this little snapper turtle here, they will bury themselves. And so you can actually see that this one has wakened from hibernation, has a deep layer of dirt on top of it. They'll actually bury themselves within the banks of the rivers that they go into so that they don't freeze during the winter. I said that they're able to breathe. Well, yep, they are. They have a lung, and the lungs are pretty cool. They're a different shape than our lungs, but yet they still have two different distinct lungs. They encourage a large surface area for gas exchange. And if you look at this, they do have alveoli. So they do have a right and left lobe like ours. They're hooked again to this glottis, then to a larynx, trachea, and then they have bronchioles. This is similar to what we have in other species anatomy as well. Circulatory is a little bit different. As you can see, we have pictures of a heart here from a lizard, snake, crocodile, and turtle. Most reptiles do have a septum. This is a septum that divides the center of most of them. However, you can see that the septum, which is breaking the right and left ventricle and right and left ventricle away from each other, they're a little bit different. And so we need to make sure that we understand that they're in different positions. And some of this is based on body size. Snakes are a little bit more flexible, and so their heart reflects that flexibility. They all have a pulmonary aorta where blood goes into, and then they have a right and left atrium and right and left ventricles. Ventricles are typically at the bottom of the heart for most species, and they are going to be an atria at the top. Ventricles are much more muscular than atria because they're pushing blood out over a long distance. The left ventricle for all of these species will push the blood to the body. It's still, if you notice, the septum does not completely separate, so you can see that we do have some oxygenated and deoxygenated parts moving together, especially within our lizard, our snake, and a little bit in our turtle. Our crocodilian is a little bit different. If you can see that, we almost have a complete separation for that septum and no more blood overflowing. This allows for them to be bigger in body size and quicker in motion. Ooh. The mixture of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood does have some disadvantages to it, such as you're not always getting oxygenated blood with as high a content as oxygen to all parts of the body. Let's talk about reproduction, those amniotic eggs up here. So they reproduce sexually with internal fertilization inside of the female. However, the female will still lay eggs, as pictured above. Oh, look at the little turtles. The amniotic eggs contain both water supply and food supply, and this is key to the success of terrestrial reptiles. Even sea turtles will go back to land to lay their eggs. They usually will dig a big hole and put their eggs in it and then gently cover it up. The amniotic sac or embryo containing this little baby will have a source of food. It will develop blood vessels, and then it is more of a leathery-like sac, so it's a little bit more flexible than we would consider what we find in birds. Let's talk about some groups of reptiles. So turtles and tortoises, those are the two most common and familiar ones to this part of the United States. Turtles have more of a stream-like shell, where tortoises have a dome-like shell. However, turtles and tortoises both have a shell which covers their body and contains part of their spine. They can pull their arms and legs in to avoid predators. Both lack teeth, but their jaws are covered in sharp plates that they can use for grinding, so they're most of the time going to be herbivores. Their shell does have two parts. One is the carapace. Ooh, that sounds familiar. That carapace is the top portion of the shell, and the plastron, which is the bottom portion of the shell. Here's some turtles. So again, turtles need to be near the water. They live near aquatic systems. They will have a stream-like shell because they are able to swim in water. It is extremely hard, and you can see right here when they're in trouble, their shell can protect them from predators. They do not care for their young. They'll lay their eggs, go back to where their water source is, and then the babies will hatch out. The babies will find their way, hopefully, to the water source and develop into an adult. Tortoises are a lot different. They live on land and have a dome-like shell. Tortoises and turtles can have a great lifespan. Both will lay their eggs in a hole and then cover them up. Again, fertilization for both is a sexual process that happens inside of the female through penetration of the male. Their shape of their shell does not need to be stream-like and can actually have erratic shapes to it, but is always dome-like. These guys are herbivores as well and looking for plant-based materials. They're kind of slow-moving, but slow and steady wins the race. Tuataras are pretty unique. There's 2 species of tuatara native to New Zealand. These little lizards, they are actually a living fossil. This group, unlike most reptiles, are active in low temperatures. They can burrow and bask in the sun during the day and then feed on insects, worms, and other small invertebrates at night. These guys are active predators. You can see the teeth that they actually have, which are a little bit sharp. They're really quick, and these guys will only be found in New Zealand. Crocodilian is broken up into 3 major categories: crocodiles, alligators, caimans, and gavials. These species can vary in length, and they all will capture their prey via ambush, as we can see one eating the zebras. You can see with this that they all have sharp teeth, but the jaw-like structures are very different for all of these. Their body is adapted to hunting. Their eyes will sit on top of their head that they can poke out of the water, so only their eyes and the top of their head are visible or snout. This will also allow for them to breathe. The rest of their body is submerged underwater during this. They can hold their breath for an extreme amount of time based on the size of them. Some of them can be underwater for hours before coming up. They have sharp teeth. These sharp teeth are for tearing the flesh from their prey. And the cool thing is, these vicious predators take care of their babies. They care for their young. They'll watch their nests, they'll rotate the eggs, and then when the babies are born, they'll care for them. You can hear a baby alligator, crocodile, caiman, and garo crying for their mom, and she'll come. So let's look at the differences between these. Crocodiles like the Nile Crocs can grow extremely long. You can see right here the size difference. They're the largest of all the crocodilians in their size and shape. They will also have a more rounded nose. Where our alligators are a little bit smaller. We can see our alligators down in the Florida Panhandle. Both are active hunters and are very streamlined within the systems. Caimans we can also see living in Florida and South America. Caimans are extremely small and aggressive. They are not something you want to see. They're also darker in pigmentation, almost black in color. They look like a small alligator, but you don't want to mess with these guys. They will attack you. They're extremely fast and very aggressive. They take out quite a bit of the dog population in Florida. The gavials, which we have here, have a very narrow, elongated, gar-like jaw. They're found within India. These guys are almost extinct and are not really a species that attacks people. They're eating fish most of the time. Our big groups are snakes and lizards. Snakes and lizards have common ancestors with including our pyrrhic molting, jaws, and they will have a loosely attached skull. If we can see here, we have 8 images. The top 4 are lizards, and the bottom 4 are snakes. Lizards are going to have 4 legs, while snakes don't, but they do have these long bodies, which allow for them to move. Their jaws will allow them to open wide enough to accommodate the prey in which they're going to eat, which is about the size of their body. Let's talk about lizards first. Common lizards include iguanas, geckos, and anoles, and horned lizards. There are a few species that are herbivores. Most are carnivores, and they love to eat bugs. They're found in the tropics and deserts. They're extremely fast runners, great climbers, and some of them will even have their tails break off easily to escape predators, and the tail will regrow. It is not fragmentation, however, because the broken off tail will not develop into a new lizard. Then we have everybody's favorite, snakes. Snakes swallow their prey whole, but they still eat very large prey. Snakes have extremely flexible jaws because their jaws have a 5-point movement system. And we can see this hinging ligament here will actually expand out so the jaw can almost dislocate, allowing for it to go even wider to absorb that prey. Many larger snakes, such as boas, pythons, and constrictors, wrap their bodies around their prey and suffocate them. This guy right here is albino. Fun. So this boa is an albino, and he is very large. People have these as pets. If your snake starts to wrap itself around your neck for fun, it's just sizing you up to see if you can become the next meal. However, boas and other constrictors have become invasive species in the state of Florida because that's their natural, warm, lovely habitat with lots of food in the wetlands. And because of this, people have got them as pets and then decided they're too much work, so they let them go. This becomes an issue down there, and these guys can actually sneak into houses and eat small children, if allowed. Most of the time, that never happens. Your family pet is much better. In the Midwest, though, we will see things like a diamondback rattlesnake. These are venomous, and they will actually strike to protect themselves. They're not actually trying to kill you, not a larger predator. They save their striking for things like mice. Ugh. If you have a mice infestation, you're gonna have snakes. Just to let you know. And that is reptile.